as a trustworthy, family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Against the Boards. Chamberlain Bauder here, Paul Russo producing, and we are back from Foxboro in Massachusetts from last weekend. A lot of stuff happening in the lacrosse and hockey worlds in our area. A lot to get into today. We're going to take a main focus on the NCAA tournament, as of course I was at the championship and the Big Red pulled out the big time dub. We'll talk about that as we go here today. But also quick shout outs, of course, the Bandits complete the three-peat over the weekend. Matt Vince becomes probably the greatest pro winning player ever. If you can find someone else that has two three-peats like that, I mean, it's with two completely different teams 10 years apart, and to do that second one at the age that he is simply outrageous. But then also, of course, the Amherst fall to Laval in Game 5 of that series. They had their end-of-year press conferences on Tuesday. We're going to talk about those next week. I'll give you the whole rundown on everything with that at the end of the show. But as we said, I was at Gillette this weekend for the games in Foxboro. First, of course, on Saturday, Penn State and Cornell facing off. Then it was Syracuse and Maryland. And then on Monday, it was that national championship game. Unfortunately, on Sunday, I was cooped up in a room listening to the terrible loss for the Amherst and not at the Division II national championship game, which was an absolute barn burner. But all in all, an awesome weekend. We've got a lot to get into for you. Just to preface how these interview clips that you're going to see are, each of these press conferences was probably about 15 to 20 minutes long. My goal was to cut out any time that a coach just gave a full coach speak answer, but also to cut out any of the kind of unnecessary stuff. You're going to see a little bit of a mix of some X's and O's type aspects that will explain why certain things happened in certain games. You'll also hear from different coaches and players talking about the rest of their team and their teammates. But as we talk about all of the games from this weekend, we're going to talk about each game a little bit first before we get into those press conferences. And of course, we have to start with the first game of the weekend, which was that Cornell and Penn State matchup. Now, this was one for me going into this game. I said, ultimately, in my mind, if Cornell's going to lose one game of this tournament, it's going to be against Penn State, because their game already in the regular season that they lost was against Penn State, and it was without Matt Traynor and Kyle Lehman playing for Penn State in that game, who are Trainor's their best offensive player and Lehman is their initiator for everything. So at the end of the day, you assume that Penn State is going to be at a higher level. Also, the way that Penn State's zone had been playing to that point, it was just getting better every single game. And in that first quarter, when there was no goal until the final 9 seconds, it really looked like that zone defense was ready to completely clamp down. But with that said, I will say I was sitting there at the end of the first quarter going, when is this eventually going to let up? And, you know, I think at the end of the day, it was, for me as a Hobart fan, just awesome to watch Penn State clearly running with a system that was very Hobart-esque in that it runs through the lefty on offense, and it's a zone defense. Given, you know, face-offs could have been a little bit more improved in that conversation, and specialists, albeit, but ultimately that zone defense was completely perfect to watch, really. Tambroni knows exactly what he's doing with that group, and there's really no surprise about that. Of course, they make it to championship weekend, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them consistently make it to championship weekend, really, no matter who Tambroni has on that team. I mean, Alex Ross locked down CJ Kirst, and this is one of my few offshoots not about a guy from upstate New York, but In this game, Alex Ross just completely shut down CJ Kirst. He could not go low. He could not get underneath. He couldn't get to the crease. And because of that, he had 0 goals and 0 assists on 7 shots. It was just a complete masterclass of a defensive effort from specifically Ross, but really from that Penn State group as a whole. I mean, 11 goals does not do that group justice for how well they played defense. Now, with that said, this Cornell team is just so good and gritty, and I was about to say skilled is the first word, and they are skilled, don't get me wrong, but the grit and motor is way higher than where their skill is. And I think that's probably ultimately the catalyst to why this team winds up being so good, is because they are so skilled, and yet they are more of an effort team than they are a skill team. But at the end of the day, you have one of the best riding attack groups in the entire country. You have that forced 3 stopped clears against Penn State in that game. You also have ultimately just a group that in transition dictates play and dictates the pace of play. And then, as you'll hear John Tillman talk about later, the Maryland head coach, this is not a team that you ever want to put in 3-on-3s or 4-on-4s because they have that high skill. So at the end of the day, I mean, anybody that's getting into a game with Cornell right now, it really seems, or that got into a game with Cornell as this weekend hit in Gillette, it was just, can you hang with them? Probably not. A massive, massive piece of this game was New York Atlas draft pick Hugh Kelleher. Kelleher had 3 goals. He had the eventual icer with the 11th late on in that game, but he was really the key catalyst to, if CJ can't cook, I can still cook from up top on that lefty side and get shots from the outside, and that's what he did in that game. And so in game 1 of the weekend, the Cornell Big Red pull out the win 11-9 over Penn State. And as we head to the post game for this one, we're going to start out hearing from Connor Busick. He gets into a little bit more of the X's and O's with the faceoffs because early on it was all Penn State, but that flipped in the second quarter.
Connor, how did Jack adjust from the 0-for-4 start to finish 16-21 on the rest of the way?
Yeah, I think I'm more, this is conjecture more than anything, but I think they were jumping some whistles and kind of guessing a little bit. And then as they started to vary the cadence there, it seemed like they started to get some more violations, and then they had to slow down their cadence a little bit. And once that happened, I think Jack started to dial it. Jack's really quick and he trusts his hands, and, he's not guessing anything. And so, if they're able to jump it, good for them. And I think that was kind of the difference there. A few violations there that slowed them down a little bit and made them hold a little bit. And then from there, Jack's done what Jack's done all year. He's a resilient kid. He's a tough kid. He wins the big ones. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think he won 10 of the 12 in the second half or something along those lines. And that's a difference maker for us. That gets our offense in rhythm. That allows us to play in different ways and use them in the sub game and create opportunity for ourselves. And so he's a superstar. He's a competitor. He's tough. He's resilient. And today on the biggest stage, he did some pretty special things to help us win. With CJ not having the day that he might have expected or we would have hoped for, it's 6-man offense. We talk about it constantly. It's not about who's at the end of the rainbow. It's about who's doing their job to make sure that we're creating great opportunities. And today he did his job. He didn't press. He didn't try to do too much. He wasn't hunting his own to make sure that he felt good at the end of the day. He just wanted our team to win. And we've got the best player in the country who's just working to make sure that his team wins the game. You've got a pretty special group that trusts one another, that believes in one another, and is going to overcome whatever situation comes our way.
Take one more up top and then down here to close out.
All season long at this time of year, you rely on the seniors, and you told me you've relied on them all year. Over these next 48 hours, you're going to rely on these guys to cap it off the way they want to.
They have the keys. This is their program. I'm here to lead, to help, to mentor, to coach. This is their program, and they're driving this thing forward. The success, the belief, the resilience you're seeing is all being driven from within. And when you've got young men that you can trust to do that, it really creates an incredibly high ceiling.
What did you make of the fact that they were able to create some unsettled stuff, given how well you guys have been containing them for the most part in a more settled situation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly watching and evaluating the Richmond game, that stood out. I mean, I want to say they had 8 or 9 goals in unsettled transitions. So we made a point in the short week of practice just to make sure that we were getting bodies in our bodies. And to Kevin's point, I just feel like we stopped supporting. So there were some natural slide opportunities to get out and support the ball a little bit better and maybe just recover around him that we lost in the moment. It definitely happens. Credit Cornell, I thought when it did happen, they just really made the most of each of the situations, shot the ball really well, and probably in the 7 or 8 minute period, really kind of avalanched into that lead, which became insurmountable, but certainly correctable, would have been correctable.
All right. Unfortunately, my camera died literally right at that point in the interview with Tambroni. That's why it ends that abruptly. I wish there were another reason that were better, but that was also that he only said like 5 more words at the end of that question. I'd like to clarify, but yeah, camera died at the end of the Penn State press conference. Tough moment, all good. We bounced back, got some questions in for quotes situations, and then popped back up to the press box. But just to quickly talk about some things off of that, I mean, when this Cornell team starts to pop and starts to roll, they snowball like no other. And that was kind of what Tambroni was talking about there at the end. When they get on these runs and these stretches, they just then it can get too far away from you from little mistakes, and those just snowball. And then you end up with a 5-goal run in the third quarter, and the game completely flips on its head to 10-6 after a Michael Long goal with 2 minutes left in the third. And from there, it was just, can Penn State catch up? And ultimately, they couldn't in the end of that game. Hugh Kelleher, like we said, lays the hammer with about 5.5 minutes left to go in that game, makes it 11-9 final, and that is the end of game 1 of the semis. Penn State out in the court or in the semis once again. Cornell, though, moving on to the championship for the first time since 2022, when all those guys that Connor Busick talked about being freshmen the last time they were here are now seniors, completely leading this group. Now, we go from an older group to a bit of a younger group, at least the one that we're going to focus on talking about in the next game. And I mean, actually, we're going to talk about both of these teams pretty equally, because if you checked out the article that I posted on Saturday night, which you definitely should if you haven't, Maryland has probably just as many upstate New York connections for players and actual proximity to playing in the area and being, from schools that are relevant to the Section 5 and Finger Lakes area. Maryland has more connections than, Syracuse does. Maryland has more connections than Cornell does. Definitely has more connections than Penn State does. Actually, I think Cornell's the only one that there might be more guys from the Section 3, 4, and 5 area than on this Maryland team. So, with that said, of course, Syracuse and Maryland. Game 2 starts at 2:30. For me, going from the Penn State press conference up to this game had already started. So it's on the TV in the elevator when we get into the elevator out of the press conference, and it was already 3-1 in favor of Maryland. And my takeaway from the weekend, honestly, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the national championship, Maryland is the most dangerous team in the country with a lead, because they know how to play with a lead. They will sit on that ball until there's 8 seconds left in the shot clock, and they will still find a way to score on over 40% of their opportunities. And when you can do that successfully time and time again, the other team cannot do anything about it, period. And so, really, that is exactly what happened in this game. Maryland, the easiest comparison that I can bring for this, actually, the way that Maryland plays lacrosse is the way that this is going to be a deep cut. FC Bayern Munich played soccer in 1999. Ultimately, it's the score the game winner in the first 15 minutes of the game and then hold the ball and do not give it up. And if you keep possession, you can win a game. I mean, in lacrosse terms, you're winning that game 7-6 or 7-5. In soccer, you're winning that game 1-0, right? But Maryland 100% plays like that. They get out to an early lead, they're going to sit on that thing like a mother hen. And who can blame them? That is exactly what you should do when you know that you have a team that can control the ball like that, and you have a defense that essentially can as consistently stop any offense in the country as consistently as your offense is at using an entire shot clock to score a goal. So you get this continuous add-on to one another, and ultimately it works out in Maryland's favor. Now, like we said, we'll get to it in a second. That's when they get to a lead. If they can play from that lead, they have the game in their hands. When John Tillman can dictate what happens in 60 minutes, Maryland's going to win. Almost guaranteed. That does not get decided, though, from his 5 days of prep. That gets decided from how the first 5 minutes of the game play out. That's what decides whether or not they can dictate the game. So, first 5 minutes, Syracuse scores the first goal of the game, but then goes 20 minutes scoreless. And it was an 8-goal run from Maryland. There was just no chance. A 6-goal hole against the Maryland Terrapins, the second best team in the country, is not the team to do that to, at all, in the slightest. And yeah, I mean, this game was honestly boring. I can honestly say that. Syracuse fans might be disappointed in that. The only two redeeming qualities of this game for Syracuse fans. Jimmy McCool had 10 saves in the first half. Joey Spallina, in the last 30 seconds of the game, finally had the assist to get his 90th point of the season. Those are the only two redeeming qualities of the entire game for Syracuse fans. I don't think anybody will convince me that there was anything else to pull from that as a plus. Maybe Mullen at the face-off dot, but still, not really. But nonetheless, post-game for Syracuse and Maryland was a pretty somber room. Pretty slow-talking Gary Gait. He knew how to play the game.
I mean, the attack is as good as any attack you'll see. They're more skilled than any attack you're going to see all year. Joey Spallina, my book, he's one of the top 5 players out there. Just you look at what he did last week, guy that just gets it done. But everything else, like English, probably the best midfielder this year. So they put 6 really skilled guys. Hiltz is going to be a great pro. They always put you under pressure, so you have to be in sync. You got to kind of hope that you're giving up some shots that Logan has a chance. And they had some good looks, and Logan just, again, getting 14 saves from him was huge. Sometimes, when we make a mistake, he kind of bails us out, and it's not lost on me.
Sure. That was, quite a game. Yeah. Coach Tillman and his team were outstanding today. They executed like a team that's been to a dozen Final Fours in the last, 15 years, something like that. Lots of experience, and the execution was outstanding. Unfortunately, we came in, we played the first half like it was the first time we've been here in 12 years. So, but I give my guys a ton of credit. They never quit, and they didn't quit today. They played to the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really special group of guys in there, and it's a special group of guys that return, and you got a handful of leaders on that team that are killers and good and baller. Just all those guys are animals in that dressing room, and they've had a chance to taste it a little bit and be here and experience championship weekend. And yeah, I mean, they're going to be back here, and I'm excited to watch those guys play.
Up front.
Sam, Patrick Stevens with Lacrosse Magazine. What do you kind of think went sideways for you there when they went 8 in a row, and how much did them getting out in transition, which I know you guys wanted to do, how much do you think that ultimately hurts you guys?
Yeah, I mean they've been here before. Coach Gates said it. They know how to play in these games, and they know how to strangle you when you're down. It's an unbelievable Maryland team that'll give Cornell a game on Monday, and I just think they know how to win, and they know how to step on your throat when they have it.
Well, a lot of times, we had some early mistakes, on the clear in the midfield. They pressured us a little bit. They were able to get their guys on, and we didn't get the ball out early. Early on, we were hesitant, and they were able to get turnovers, come right back down, and really just take control of that ball and wait until they found good shots. And like I said, most of the time they're deep in the shot clock, and if we got a save, Jimmy had a great first half, 10 saves, and kept giving us chances, but we needed to get the ball out quicker and more consistently in that first half, and we didn't do it.
That's right.
Brent Dack, Syracuse.com again. Gary, you mentioned during the week that you got to make some tweaks when you play a team like Maryland. Is that half the battle? Is that half the challenge with Maryland? Is that they make you alter your game plan? You think too much? There's so much that goes into that you have to adjust to them as opposed to.
You have to make plays because they're going to take the ball and sit on it. So and I think that maybe was a little too much for our guys, that pressure of, okay, I got to go out and make a play. And we got to do this early. And it kind of what they did to us, we wanted to be able to do to them, build a bit of a lead and then, kind of play with them. But when you're playing catch up, you really can't do that. And it made it really difficult to come back. And, but these guys are resilient, and they certainly didn't give up, and tried to make a couple small runs and get back in it, but unfortunately came up short.
Just, you talked about the vibe in that locker room right now is not that they got here, but at the end of the day, when a month from now these guys are thinking about this, how much of a fire did today light for them next season?
I think it'll go a long way. I know losing last year in the quarterfinals really was something that these guys came back and said, we're not going to lose that quarterfinal again, and they found a way to get the job done there. So I know they'll put their foot down and say, we are going to commit even more to this team to make sure that we get to the final and we get a chance to win a national championship. And I know that they're going to be one of the most committed teams in the entire country to get that done.
Tough presser for Syracuse there. Obviously, heard from my question at the end. The determination for this team is no doubt going to be there, but we're just going to have to wait and see it come to fruition actually next season, ultimately. Joey Spallina as a senior for that true chance at the Tuerton Award. John Mullen, another year older for this group at faceoff. Ultimately, I mean, that whole offense just continues to get better. Finn Thompson and Trey Deer are the two that really peak in my mind when I think about that group. Peyton Anderson as well. Just some of their young core that's going to keep getting older and get better on that offensive end. But ultimately, yeah, they started going to the transfer portal. They started knowing what they're doing in that sense and what to use. So I don't think there's any doubt Syracuse will be back in a situation to put themselves into the Final Four again next year. The key thing will ultimately be if they can. I felt like their MO throughout this tournament was the cardiac kids. It was just giving this, let's go down by 6 and see if we can dig it out kind of mentality in a lot of settings in this game, or in the games that they played between Harvard and Princeton. And ultimately, you can't be the cardiac kids against the defibrillator that is the Maryland Terrapins. It just doesn't work. And so ultimately, the Terps roll through that one. Final score on that was 14-8. Not really. If you want a real score, if you could get like an actual score from that game, probably more so like 14-6 or 14-5. Really, it was a 9 or 10 goal game between those two teams that got played out. But as we were saying a little bit before that, and we'll get into now, that Maryland squad, of course, has a lot of guys, 3 guys specifically, that are deep connections to upstate New York, and we will get into all of those real quick right now. Thomas Gravino plays short stick defensive midfield for the Terps. He starts for that unit. Number 6, a 4-star recruit out of Victor High School in upstate New York. Plays his summer collegiate box lacrosse league for the Rochester Hawkeyes, averaged just over 3 goals a game over the last season, and like I said, plays short stick D midi for this Maryland squad. But ultimately, it's just so sweet to think about a kid from Victor, and given, kids from Victor, they usually get to these stages. Sam Ritchie is on Cornell, and he just won a national championship. But to go to, in your 2 years of college, to have made it to a national championship every time and have a coach that there's seemingly no doubt you're going to make it to that weekend again, that's got to be an awesome feeling. Another young guy on that group, Jonah Carrier, the face-off specialist out of Irondequoit, and was also the Monroe County Offensive Player of the Year last year for Irondequoit, but is a FOGO, of course, for the Maryland Terrapins. He was actually the only Terp with a winning face-off percentage in the national championship game. So big ups to the first year out there from Irondequoit. And the last one, rounding out the trio of the upstate New York boys, is the graduate student, Logan McNaney. Now, McNaney went to the Salisbury School in Connecticut for high school, so he went private, but he is originally from Corning, New York. And ironically enough, the game that I'm broadcasting later today between Ithaca High School and Corning Painted Post girls lacrosse is going to be coached by his mom for Corning Painted Post. Kim McNaney is the coach for the girls team at Corning Painted Post. And so obviously, the lacrosse world, pretty tight knit. McNaney from Corning, also from Corning, is John Tillman, who is from Corning, went to Cornell, coached at Ithaca as his first job before then moving on to his whole career that he had after that. But the upstate New York connections reign supreme on that Maryland squad between those 4. And ultimately, though, at the end of the day, when it came down to that national championship game, I personally went into it actually with way more doubt than if you asked me on Friday on my way down who was going to win the whole thing, I would have told you Cornell. If you asked me Monday morning when I woke up who was going to win the whole thing, I would have had a lot more questions in that setting against Maryland. But at the end of the day, like we were saying earlier, for this Maryland squad, they are the most dangerous team in the country when they have a lead. And that was never the case in this game for Maryland. It was a 1-0 start for Cornell, and then eventually a 5-3 start. At the end of the first half, a 6-5 lead, and ultimately that was without CJ Kirst doing anything. And then in the second half, 15 strapped up the boots, and for the first time in 48 years, the Cornell Big Red are national champions. And 21 years after 2004, when George Boyardi tragically passed away at Cornell, 21 years later, number 21 is celebrated as Connor Busick leads the Cornell Big Red back to a win on Memorial Day. Storybook doesn't even start to describe it, I feel like. Honestly, just a complete bookend type finish for this squad. They had to beat a former Cornell coach and a former Cornell player on championship weekend to hoist the trophy. All of those seniors that were on that team that lost to the same Maryland squad in 2022 turned the corner and I mean, it was storybook. There's no other way to put it. The way that CJ Kirst took over that second half was watching that in person was one of those moments. Have you ever seen a moment where you're watching something happen and you go, I'm actively in real time watching one of the moments of lacrosse that has a chance to be talked about 30 years from now. It's how I felt last year when I was in Boston and watched Connor Fields rip an upper 90 between its legs with one hand. That was how I felt throughout the entire second half. When Kirst got to 5, I kind of was sitting there, and that, of course, that fifth one was his last from with McNaney in the cage. I was just sitting there thinking, like, actually, I asked someone in the room, when is the last time that someone scored 6 in the national championship? Because we had talked about it on Saturday, stating that, well, now CJ would need 6 to tie the all-time single-season record for goals, and that hasn't happened in a long time. The last time it happened was Paul Rabel, and they didn't win that national championship. So, at the end of the day, like, what are the odds that's actually going to happen? Slim to none. And then you end the first half, and he still hasn't even scored a goal yet. And he just absolutely lit it up in that second half. Came out, scored the first 2 goals of the second half, scored the first 3 Cornell goals of that second half, and then scored 2 of the last 3 goals of that game. But in the midst of that, one moment that we cannot let be forgotten is the greatest save of the entire tournament that came up by the Corning native in Logan McNaney. CJ Kirst, after his 3rd or 4th goal, I honestly can't remember, but talk about matchstick. Absolutely perfect. Shout out to Lax Goalie Rat for the great camera angle. If you're a young goalie and you want any tips or extra video inspiration from some goalies, that's your spot to go for sure. But McNaney with, I mean, no doubt to me, the best save of the tournament. Cuts across, off stick side. That ball was destined for the top corner from Kirst. He faked low and tried to keep it high, and just absolute robbery from McNaney. That's such a beautiful save. I absolutely love it. But obviously that save is big, and McNaney had a decent number of saves in this game as time went on. He ended the game with 11 saves. But at the end of the day, one of the other takes that I had on this game was that if Maryland was going to win, and this was what a lot of people were saying in that press conference or in the press box, if Maryland was going to win, Logan McNaney needed to be the player of the game. And unfortunately, he was under 50% for one of the first times in a long time this season, and he didn't play badly by any stretch. I mean, you saw the save. He makes outrageous stops, but he was not the best player on the field. And at the end of the day, that's what they would have needed out of McNaney if they were going to win this game. And that save, honestly, that was a big-time moment in this game also, because at the end of the day, that save happening was right before a 2-goal run to make it a 1-goal game by Maryland. They were down 7-10. Goldstein had just scored. McNaney makes that save, and then it's 2 quick goals for Maryland, make it a 1-goal game, and you're thinking, whoa, McNaney's save just turned this game around. That's the moment. And then right after that, CJ Kirst goes and bags his 5th. And it was just kind of like, oh, nope, never mind. There is a new king in college lacrosse, and his last name is Kirst. And that's just how the cookie crumbles in that one. And ultimately, as we go to the post-game press conference for that game, we will first be hearing from Connor Busick in his quick opening thoughts, but it was just awesome to see the joy on the faces of that group of guys, 2 seniors, and of course Goldstein, the underclassman, with a national championship.
For these guys to achieve this goal to bring a title back to Cornell for the first time in 48 years. I simply don't have the words for it, but I'm so proud as an alum, as a guy that gets to work with them every single day. They've earned everything that they've gotten, and I'm really glad we get to enjoy this moment together.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to finish the way that you kind of started your career, getting to face off against Maryland in the national championship. Throughout our careers, that we've had a lot of ups and downs. Obviously, we had the high of going to the national championship our freshman year, and then sophomore year, end up going out in the first round, probably with a just as good a team as we had the year before. Junior year, don't make the tournament. And then we really used that as fuel for this year and just showed up to work every single day, extremely focused and just focused on this one goal, and we made it happen.
Brian, it took 2 generations of Goldsteins to get this trophy back to Ithaca. What does this mean for you and your family?
Yeah, it's been great. I've been going to Final Fours for as long as I can remember. My family's my mom and dad both play lacrosse at Cornell, so my dad lost 2 national championships, so he's definitely fired up for this one. Especially what it meant to be. Hasn't really hit me yet, but I'm sure it will soon. It's a really special moment. I'm happy to do with this group of guys. It's been awesome.
What does it mean to you to have that fan base and just like a grow the game mentality and how lacrosse is just growing as a sport for any of you?
Yeah, they're the best. I kind of spoke to the team last night about that moment where, you drive by that tailgate, like you said, on the bus with a police escort, and you're seeing everyone that supported you. And it's brought tears to a couple guys, and, guys are feeling chills, and, just to have that support when you're playing on the biggest stage is incredible, and it definitely motivates you. But, to grow the game, I mean, you see that crowd, you see that support. I know everyone was so excited to give everything they got, and, we competed for 60 minutes because of everyone there. So, wouldn't have been able to do it without everyone up there.
I got one point to add on to that. I think that in my local guys today, that's every single game. They're there every single game. They're texting us every single game day. A couple of alums I got a shout out. They're always texting CJ and I, Todd Adler, Mike Levine, Rob Pennell is always texting us. Those guys and so many more care so much about this program. And I know you said that it comes from our culture. We talk about it all the time, and you see that today. But it's every single day. We think about those guys and we play for those guys.
Yeah, when you step on foot on campus, you hear about the culture. When you're recruited, they talk about, the experience that you're going to go through and how it's going to be challenging. Nothing's going to be given to you, and, you got to earn everything. And, and when I first started and had COVID going on, I wasn't really fully bought in the program. I wasn't experiencing everything. And, in that 2022 season, I learned everything from Coach Busick, all the whole coaching staff and that senior class, what it meant to show up every single day, to put the group in front of you, to put a smile on your face during the hard times, to listen to Coach Halley and what he has to say after a lift, to listen to all the alumni and all the motivation that they give you every single game day. And, it's a special program, and you can't really describe the culture that we have unless you're a part of it. But, my 4 years here and being able to put on the jersey the last time today, I'm super, super proud of what I've been able to experience. And, I speak on behalf of the entire senior class. We try doing everything we can to instill that into the younger guys. And, I have Coach Busick and Coach Stevens, Coach Ferry to thank for that. And, super happy that, being a Cornell man is going to continue for the rest of my life. And I'm so happy that we're able to, bring it home for all the alumni who've taught us everything.
Basically, that's what they do. But their ride is so good. Those 3 guys are all fast. They're athletic. And when your best player is arguably the best rider, it rubs off on everybody. And again, that's just CJ being CJ, making plays.
Logan McNaney obviously has been a staple of this team for so long. Being a guy from Corning as well, just what has he meant to you over his time in Maryland?
Yeah, he's a special dude from a special family, from a special place. I'm so thankful for where I grew up. Just great people, great values, and Logan represents that town so well. Again, hardworking people, but really good people with good values, and Logan exemplifies that. He's ultra competitive. He's going to go out there and obviously do a great job and try to do his best. Yet, he takes off that helmet and you see this boyish face, this young guy, and you're like, how is that you? Consistent, modest, team first guy, will do anything for his teammates. Gave us always, when we weren't doing well, always gave us like confidence, and we you have some moments, whether it's today or other days, bring it in, and it's like having that quarterback that's like, guys, I got you. Like I said, you got to give Cornell credit. This is competition. We could have lost Saturday. We could have lost last week. So it's going to be over at some point. Wish I had done a better job getting them ready. Yet you got to tip your hat to Cornell. Again, they were, over the course of the year, the best team. They just were. And they showed it today. They played like a bunch of guys that came back for a purpose, motivated. And again, like a lot of those guys, we played against a 22. They're all grown up. And they reminded me of our 22 team in a lot of ways, for sure.
Most important point to me out of that Tillman quote at the end there, of course, I loved hearing him talk about Logan McNaney and what he meant to that team in the huddle as a quarterback for that group. But hearing at the end there how much this Cornell team reminded him of his Maryland team from 2022 was really interesting. And it's really true. There are a lot of similarities between those two teams, no doubt about it in my mind. But I love having a coach that can be gracious in his defeat, for Tillman being a guy that ultimately understands at the end of the day, for like a guy like Logan McNaney being on that team, he's literally been to championship weekend every single year that he's started for Maryland. He has gotten an extra entire year of playing time out of, or an entire extra season, not year, let's say season, out of his Maryland lacrosse career, because every single time his season has been 3 weeks longer than it was supposed to be. You add that up, that's a 12-week season. There's your season. There's 3 months. It is awesome to hear that from him. And of course, like we talked about earlier there, Jonah Carrier will be back at faceoffs next year, and we'll see if Thomas Gravino eventually works his way into the offensive midfield side of things, or if he's going to stay as a short stick D-midi for this squad. But ultimately, the Cornell Big Red are national champions. Absolutely emphatic performance all the way through the end of the season, a near perfect season, one overtime loss away from a perfect season, avenging all of their demons that they possibly could as they went through and did it. And of course, Connor Busick now, for the first time in his career, a national champion. That's got to just be an awesome feeling when you come as a player, and Busick talked about this. He joined the program off of the loss in 2009, coming in invigorated with the idea of Cornell can be a championship weekend program and we can win it. And it took until he became the coach. But in 5 years with this program now, 2 national championships, and he's 50%. Connor Busick is on the up and up some already are saying the next John Tillman, but ultimately just when it comes to culture, he really is a Sean McVay type coach in college lacrosse right now. And it is just awesome to see. And the last note from that's actually interesting. Jordan Stevens stepped down from coaching after the win. The associate head coach for the Cornell Big Red had been there since 2016. And he stepped down from coaching overall after that win. So Cornell going to be ready to keep on rolling with Connor Busick at the helm next year, of course, and they'll start to turn over from this CJ Kirst, Michael Long, and Wyatt Nust era that they were living in. But of course, Ryan Goldstein will still be there, the legacy Cornell player for that squad. And until that second half of that national championship, Ryan Goldstein was the player of the tournament. So definitely still looking up for this Cornell squad. And when Busick's at the helm, you know that you've got a squad that is ready to do the little things. Now the question will be next year if this Cornell squad has the skill to match that effort again like they did this year. I think that is such a perfect equation for a national championship. If you have the right amount of skill and effort combined, and if that effort outweighs your skill, you're going to succeed. That's going to do it for us for this week on Against the Boards. Next week's episode is going to come out on Tuesday, not Thursday, just so that everyone is ready for that. It'll be a noon on Tuesday start for next week, and we will get into everything from the end of the season for the Rochester Americans. We'll probably talk a little bit of Bandits, but not really all that much, and probably preview a little bit more of the summer. We'll have a little bit of a PLL in Albany to talk about. We'll see how our Nighthawks and upstate New York players fare there. But for myself, Chamberlain Bauder, and my producer, Paul Russo, this has been Against the Boards. We'll see you next Tuesday.